Colorado father just learned his punishment for one of the most horrifying child abuse cases in recent memory. His two young children locked away for 6 years, their bodies discovered in a storage unit and an abandoned car. He took a plea deal, testified against his girlfriend, and now he's been sentenced to decades in prison. But is this the right result? We're going to break down exactly what happened in this case, and we're going to be speaking with a Colorado criminal defense attorney to understand it. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Probably seen, unfortunately, a lot of tragic cases in the news, but I will tell you this one out of Colorado is almost impossible to wrap your head around. Why? A father, his girlfriend, two young children, and a horrifying secret that was hidden away for 6 years. And what police eventually uncovered inside of a storage unit and an abandoned car, it's almost too disturbing to believe. And now, the father at the center of this all has finally learned his punishment. And we will wonder and we will ask whether it is the correct punishment. I'm going to tell you about this in just a bit, but first we got to take a step back. If you haven't heard of this Pueblo, Colorado case before, I think you really need to understand how bad it really is, okay? Two children, Yesenia and Jesus Jr., vanished in 2018. For years, no one asked questions. There were no missing person reports, there were no police searches, but in 2024, crews that were cleaning out after an eviction stumbled on something so strange in a locked container, and it was that discovery that unraveled the terrible truth of what happened to these young kids and how the people who were supposed to protect them instead hid their deaths in plain sight. It takes us back to January 2024 when Pueblo police were called to a storage unit. Family members of Jesus Dominguez and his girlfriend Corena Minjarez were helping clear out their belongings after the couple were evicted. But inside that unit, they noticed something very strange. A heavy metal container filled with concrete. So clearly they were suspicious and they contacted authorities. And when police opened it, they made a chilling discovery. Inside was the decomposed body of Dominguez's 3-year-old daughter, Yesenia, encased in hardened concrete. Detectives immediately knew this wasn't an accident, this was concealment. It was that discovery that set off a larger investigation. And 2 weeks later, officers find this car that was once owned by Dominguez sitting in a local scrapyard. When they open that trunk, inside of a suitcase wrapped in garbage bags, comforters, even covered with cat litter and baby powder, to mask the smell, they found the remains of his 5-year-old son, Jesus Dominguez Jr. When I say this is terrible and awful, I'm not overstating it. It is awful. But now we have to talk about what happens. So the autopsy on Yesenia listed her manner of death as homicidal violence. The problem is, due to decomposition, that prevented examiners from actually pinpointing a cause of death. What was clear is that both children had been dead since 2018, 6 years before their bodies were finally uncovered. So how did this happen? According to court testimony, both Dominguez and Minjarez were heavy drug users at the time. Dominguez testified during Minjarez's trial that she struggled with the children, especially over potty training. He said that she could be cruel, even making them sit inside plastic bags during car rides because she didn't want urine on her seats. March 14th, 2018, Dominguez's 30th birthday, 3-year-old Yesenia reportedly soiled herself in the car. So Dominguez said she was forced to sit on the floor inside a trash bag, and at some point, that is when she stopped breathing. Now, Dominguez and Minjarez apparently considered taking her to a hospital, but decided against it. Why? Because the girl had visible signs of prior abuse, including bite marks and injuries to her hand that Dominguez said Minjarez had inflicted months earlier. Weeks later, April 2018, the abuse continued. Dominguez testified that Minjarez sprayed his son, Jesus Jr., at a self-service car wash with such force that the pressure caused cuts near the boy's groin. Soon after, Jesus Jr. too stopped breathing while sitting in the back seat, surrounded by plastic bags and blankets. Instead of seeking help, Dominguez and Minjarez drove to a field near Pueblo Dam and stuffed the boy's body into a suitcase, again, wrapping it in layers of trash bags. So for years, these children remained hidden. Yesenia in the storage unit, Jesus Jr. in the trunk of that abandoned car. Meanwhile, Dominguez kept collecting public assistance for the kids as if they were alive. It wasn't until that eviction in 2024, 6 years later, that the truth finally came out. Minjarez's mother was the one who tipped off police about the suspicious container in the storage unit. And detectives soon pieced everything together. Both Dominguez, Minjarez, they were arrested. The couple faced multiple charges. 2 counts of first-degree murder of a victim under 12 by someone in a position of trust, along with charges of abuse of a corpse. Dominguez also faced a theft charge for continuing to collect those benefits. In a trial, prosecutors painted Minjarez as this driving force behind the abuse and killings. Now, Dominguez took the stand, testified in detail about how the children died, how their bodies were hidden. And here's the point. Prosecutors said that his testimony was critical to convicting Minjarez. She was found guilty on all counts last month, sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. But what happened with Dominguez, right? Well, in July, as part of his plea deal, he entered a guilty plea not to first-degree murder, but to second-degree murder. In exchange, prosecutors, they dropped some of the charges and they secured his testimony against Minjarez. Pueblo County District Attorney Kayla Bouvez called it a tough decision, but said it was the only way to make sure both defendants were held accountable. Is that true?
Now, with my job, I'm constantly on the road, which can sometimes leave me feeling a little homesick. You know, I just was in CrimeCon out in Denver. And when life or work is stressful and you're feeling burnt out, don't you start really thinking about that one spot in your home that's supposed to be the most comfortable of all, the safe spot, the bed? For me, that's why we got to talk about Cozy Earth. Why? Because Cozy Earth has these bamboo sheets that are temperature regulating, which means I'm not waking up sweaty or freezing. I'm just comfortable all night long. And let me tell you, the bubble cuddle blanket, that is a game changer. It is ridiculously soft. It has this textured bubble design that looks amazing draped over the couch or the bed. And it's the kind of blanket that everyone in the house is going to be fighting over. Now, here's the thing. Once you feel the difference, you're going to get why Cozy Earth stands out. They even give you a 100-night sleep trial. So if you don't love them, you can send it back. Plus a 10-year warranty, because comfort like this, it should really last the long haul, right? So head over to CozyEarth.com, use my code Law&Crime for 40% off. And if you see that post-purchase survey, let them know how you heard about Cozy Earth right here, because your bed shouldn't just be where you sleep, it should be your happy place. Cozy Earth makes that happen.
And now, after all of these years of silence and concealment, Jesus Dominguez has learned his fate. And we are going to get to that in just a minute. But to break down what we've heard so far, I want to bring on Colorado criminal defense attorney Jeff Wolf. Jeff, thanks so much for taking the time. Appreciate it. It's good to see you. Why would prosecutors agree to a plea deal for Dominguez, right? Given what we're talking about here, given the severity of this situation.
Well, my understanding, I actually know the defense attorney for the mom in the case, and my understanding is the reason they did it is they gave him a sweetheart deal because they didn't have much of a case. And so they needed to get information from somebody, and he was the one who was willing to talk. And so he got a deal because he was willing to talk, even though they weren't able to confirm much of what he told them. And they got a continuance outside a speedy trial on the mom's trial to try and confirm some of the stuff he told them. That's why they gave him this deal, because he was the only one willing to talk.
They didn't have that much. I mean, you have 2 dead children in circumstances where it seems, you know, Dominguez and Minjarez are the only ones responsible, no?
Well, they didn't have any firsthand accounts. They had circumstances where they were the ones in charge of the kids, but nobody really knew what caused it. They didn't have a firsthand account to present to a jury. And so they wanted somebody to present that. And so they went to both sides and made this offer, and he was the one that jumped.
Let me ask you a question. With these kids found in these very specific conditions, it wouldn't have been enough. You don't think they would have had enough to convince a jury that both of them are responsible for killing these kids?
If it would have been enough, Jesse, why would they have given him this deal? This was something where they could have.
Yeah.
Right. They could have gone to trial with both of them as co-defendants sitting in the same courtroom, but instead what they chose to do was cut a deal with this guy. They gave him, like you said, a sweetheart deal. 32 years he ends up serving versus life.
And I guess, look, I think the issue is right, since the autopsies couldn't determine the exact causes of death, that is a challenge in proving, let's say, first degree murder, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Maybe they don't get the conviction that they wanted to get a life sentence out of somebody here. So they made a deal with the devil. It's exactly what they did.
How much weight does a jury usually give to testimony from a co-defendant who took a plea bargain? I think in every time we've seen it, and anytime we've covered a trial here on Law and Crime, it's, you have something to gain by testifying against my client. What were you offered? What were you promised? What are you looking at? Right? I mean, how much does a jury weigh that?
Well, I think it depends on the type of case, right? When you're talking about the father of the children who is taking some culpability and being involved in what happened and in the cover up of it, it to a jury that seems more believable. And obviously it does given the verdict that they came back with here in this case. And so it's not, I don't think, apples to apples to compare every single case and say, just because somebody is a co-defendant in a case, they're going to sell out and lie to a jury because they're given a good deal. I think a jury is going to look at the circumstances, and when they see a father come in and say, I am very sorry for what happened to my children, and my conscience has gotten the better of me, and that is going to give the testimony a little bit more credence to a jury, like it seems to have done here. Whether it should have, who knows?
Just to be clear, could Dominguez have faced the death penalty or life without parole if he hadn't agreed to cooperate?
There is no death penalty in the state of Colorado. That has been abolished. So no, he could not have faced the death penalty, but LWOP or life without parole, yes, he could have faced that without cooperation.
Yeah. By the way, what role do charges like abuse of a corpse or theft of government benefits, what part do those play in strengthening the prosecution's overall case?
I don't know that it strengthens the overall case when it comes to, you're looking at the death of small children. I think that it makes it harder to, walk somebody out of a courtroom completely, innocent and just say, hey, you're going home. It makes it harder as a defense attorney to think you're just going to completely skate on a case. But I don't think it involves, are you going to walk on the main charge? I don't think that it affects that part of it.
And to be clear, you had mentioned this. On September 13th, a judge sentenced Jesus Dominguez to 32 years in state prison. Couple of questions here. Any chance that Dominguez gets out before that? And if not, this is not a picnic, 32 years in state prison, but it's different than life in prison, right? So how should we be thinking about whether or not justice was served with 32 years?
Well, justice definitely was not served with 32 years based on my intimate knowledge of the case. But I will tell you that 32 years is definitely not going to be 32 years. Colorado recently had a ballot measure up for the voters that made certain crimes eligible for more time than they used to be. We used to early parole on a case like this at about 60 to 75%. Now you're looking at serving more like 75 to 80% of the sentence, but he'll definitely be out before 32 years with good behavior assumed.
Yeah, what are those factors? What do we mean by good behavior, or I don't know, repenting for what happened? What are the factors that get someone out?
It's a bit of a moving target. It's run by time computation at the Department of Corrections in Colorado, and they will constantly say that there is no set amount of things you can do to make sure that your number goes down or up. They'll say that, and they say you can't rely on your attorney's advice. You cannot rely on the words of the court of how much time you're actually going to serve. But the general factors that go into it are, number one, the actual term good behavior. Do you get in trouble while you're in there? Do you get in fights? Are you, caught with contraband, things like that? Actual behavior while you're in custody. Do you take part in educational programs? Do you, if you don't have a diploma, do you get your GED while you're in there? Things like that. Are you a trustee status? Are you, doing your job while you're in there and getting good marks from, your CO and your warden and things like that while you're in there?
What is the message you think this sentence sends to the public about the roles people play, about plea deals in severe child abuse cases? What do you think the message is?
I think the message is get to be the one that talks to the DA's office first. Tell your lawyer if you're willing to flip, because you'll get the better deal. And I think that, it sends a very, very dangerous message about when you have two people caring for children, that they're not going to be held to the same level of culpability if the DA's office believes that they need help from one of them, at least. And I think that the DA's office down in Pueblo County sent a very, very dangerous message to the people of the state of Colorado when they made this deal.
I appreciate you saying that. Do you think that they would have gotten a conviction against Minjarez without him?
Hard to know. I think that the defense in the case would say that it would have been a lot harder. I think that there were things that he said that couldn't be confirmed by the DA's office. I think that the case was tried outside of speedy trial as a result of working with him, which is a, guaranteed appeal that's coming in her case. Who knows what the result of that is going to be with the Colorado Supreme Court and some of the rulings they hand down. But it's hard to know what the effect of his actual testimony was. It's a very emotional case. It's a very gruesome case. But absolutely having somebody who can say, this is what happened, I witnessed it, made their case significantly stronger.
I hate to ask this, but I think it's important to, as we wrap this up. I look at a case like this and I say, there are details that are now going to stick with me, that it's going to be very hard to forget, that are very specific. And this is somebody, I cover a lot of child abuse cases, child death cases here on Sidebar. In your experience, maybe in Colorado, maybe looking elsewhere, do you see a lot of egregious cases of child death and concealment like this?
I mean, we had the Watts case up in northern Colorado, the other side of the state, that was just as bad as this one. Uh, it's not something that is unfortunately as rare as I think people would like it to be. I think there are probably cases we've never heard of because there are probably, unfortunately, victims that are in places that haven't been discovered and family members who haven't made phone calls like the grandmother in this case did. So I think I don't want to say ultra common. I'm not one of those people that uses scare tactics on people, but I think it happens.
Jeff Wolf, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
That is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can follow me on Instagram or X. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.